Hey, and welcome to a special edition of Strange Planet. Thanks, as always, for sticking me in your ear. And we are commemorating National Indigenous Peoples Day in the United States. Of course, it occurs every year, the second Monday in October, when we celebrate and honor Indigenous American peoples and commemorate their histories and cultures. In fact, it's celebrated across the U.S. As an official, well, not across the U.S., it's an official city and state holiday in various localities. So I thought, well, what can we talk about as part of Indigenous Peoples Day on Strange Planet? And I thought, what would fit with Strange Planet's mandate, if you will? And the first thing that popped into my mind was a fascinating legend, the legend of the Wendigo. And we're going to get into that with one of my favorite guests. D.A. Roberts is an author of fiction, primarily in the horror, dystopian, and science fiction genres. He was born in Lebanon, Missouri, now lives in Springfield, Missouri, with his wife and sons. And for most of his career, D.A. served his community in law enforcement and has been investigating and researching cryptids for more than 4 decades and is the Region 2 director of the North American Dogman Project. DA has been featured on numerous podcasts and shows, including Coast to Coast AM. For his writing and cryptid research, he's the author of a number of series of books, including The Nightmare Hunter, Code Name, The Lakeview Man, Ragnarok Rising Saga, and of course, Apex Predator, the series. D.A. Roberts, welcome back to Strange Planet. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me back on.
Now, you're Scotch-Irish by
Mhm.
background, but one of your uncles, who, as you have described previously, was kind of like your second father, your Uncle Buddy, who passed away about 3 years ago. He was a Cherokee, correct?
Yes, he was full-blood Cherokee. He married my mother's sister, and I probably spent more time at his house than I did at my own. He had a huge section of forested land out near a little town called Eldridge, Missouri, which is not far from where I grew up. And it butted up right against about 5,000 acres of conservation land. So his land is where I learned to hunt. It's where I learned how to track. Him and my brothers taught me how to fish there. I mean, it's just one of those places that uh, it'll always be that primeval forest in my mind. That place you think of as a child where everything is pristine. That is the place for me. I learned to deer hunt there. I learned to do a lot of things there, and learned a lot about how to be a better person there.
And it was also your Uncle Buddy who kind of pulled you aside and said, D.A., you're right. Sasquatch is real. I've seen him.
He'd seen him on that property. When as a kid, after I first seen like the in search ofs and things like that, I was very inquisitive. I was fascinated by the stories of Bigfoot, and of course, most of my relatives and brothers and sisters all thought I was just being a goofy kid. But it was Uncle Buddy who was the first adult to ever take me to the side. Once he sat me down when we were alone, he put me in his lap, and he says, "I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. They're real, and they're on this property. My people call them the Sul Kaloo, and you need to be very careful around them."
So we're going to talk about the legend of the Wendigo, which my understanding is the Wendigo comes to us, the legend of the Wendigo comes to us primarily from the Plains Indians and also the Great Lake Indians.
Mhm.
Um, do the Cherokee, did your Uncle Buddy ever talk about the Wendigo?
We never really discussed the Wendigo. It's not a legend that I'd even come across until after I was grown and off in the army. So I really didn't have a chance to talk about the Wendigo much with Uncle Buddy, but I have researched the subject a great deal, also utilizing resources that he kind of sent me in the direction of. So he may not have given me the information firsthand, but he told me where to find it.
All right. So what is, according to Indian legend, where does the Wendigo legend begin? How did it begin?
Well, there's several different tribes have different versions of the story. One version that's from one of the tribes in Canada, and I can't remember the name of the tribe off the top of my head. I want to say it's Algonquin.
Could be. Yeah.
But they believe it's a type of Bigfoot type creature. They describe it as being large, covered in hair, and it would carry off people from villages. And in fact, in times of really bad winters, they would take out entire villages. Then there are other versions where they describe it as being more demonic, that a inhabiting force that possesses people who have consumed human flesh. The spirit of hunger and starvation, if you will. And then other versions of the Wendigo legend have it being kind of a nature spirit that only comes out during lean times. But always that theme seems to exist across of them of consuming humans and this perpetual hunger. But the legend changes subtly as you move to different parts of the United States.
The fact that it is a legend that is that comes from, we have the Great Plains Indians, also the Great Lake Indians. It's pretty widespread. I mean, that covers a lot of territory. Um,
It
I
certainly
mean,
does.
you would, uh, if something is that widespread, do you think that indicates there must be some truth to this legend?
Well, they say that every legend has a kernel of truth, and for multiple tribes from a wide variety of areas to have similar, if not identical, legends, to me, it just says that there's something there. It's not just a shared mythology. They've experienced something. And it's kind of like when you talk about Bigfoot. Every tribe on the face of North America has a different name for Bigfoot. They all describe a similar creature. So how could so many tribes in such a wide area from the Pacific Northwest to Florida be describing similar creatures?
Right, right. I'd read one account of the sort of the origin of the Wendigo legend, and that it was a lost hunter, presumably an indigenous person who, a hunter got lost, and during a particularly brutal cold winter, and so this man, a human, his intense hunger drove him to cannibalism, and he, after I guess feasting on another human flesh, he kind of transformed into this man beast, and ever since has been roaming the forest in search of more people to eat. Um, so I mean, what other stories can you tell me about Wendigo? Are there I don't know, sort of case
There
studies
was
of people who claim to have
there
encountered a
was a
Wendigo?
there are lots of sightings of Wendigo across North America, even as far in far places like Canada, not Canada, in Colorado and through the Appalachians. There was actually a man who was hung in Canada for being accused of being a Wendigo. It was the Swift Runner case. This happened, I want to say, in the early 1900s. He emerged at a trading post claiming that his family had all died during the harsh winter. Uh, but that they'd all starved. But they noticed that he didn't look particularly starved. He looked like he was fairly well fed, and he wasn't that far from the trading post. So when they go back to his cabin, they find that his family had all been butchered and feasted and been eaten. They could find teeth marks on the bones and things like that. And he was actually sentenced to death for that. That was one of the last recorded instances of somebody being actually put to death for being accused of being a Wendigo. That was, I want to say, late 1800s, early 1900s in Canada. Also, as recently as the early 2000s, I want to say it was around 2001, there was a guy who was riding a Trans-Canadian bus. I was riding a
Yeah.
bus down a highway, and he attacked and killed a fellow passenger and began consuming his flesh. And they referred to it as Wendigo psychosis. So I don't think it's really completely left our modern mythology. I think it's still out there, and I think part of it could possibly be an attempt by indigenous people to diagnose a mental illness, or it could truly be something that does take hold of people. It could be this spirit that consumes them when they've eaten human flesh, and they become this beast.
Are there any are there any treatments for Wendigo psychosis? I mean, if they suspect someone may be suffering from that in the village.
Well, in the case of the gentleman who attacked the guy on the bus, he was put in a mental hospital, and the last I knew, I think he was released in 2016.
Wow. But what about among the indigenous people? Do they have, I don't know, is there some sort of a ceremony or a ritual or a medicine that they administer to prevent someone from, cannibalizing the rest of the village?
The only thing I've ever found reference to is ways to kill a Wendigo. I've never found references to them curing somebody. Once they've been corrupted by the Wendigo, they have to be stopped. Most of them involve use of silver or fire. In some cases, you have to cut the heart out with a silver blade and burn the heart separately from the body. When I was researching my book, Curse of the Wendigo, I found that there was just so much different varying lore on the Wendigo that it was hard to decide what to use for the book and what to use because the book was a work of fiction. It was hard to pick one version of the legend. But what I did was I looked for commonalities, and that seemed to involve silver and fire. And I think since that appears so much throughout Wendigo lore across the country, that if you did encounter one, fire and silver are probably your best option. Probably fire.
What do they look like?
Well, they've been described as being pale, gaunt humanoids, just like very, very skinny, emaciated humans, with generally their hair is missing and the flesh has been chewed from their fingers and their lips have been chewed off. Like they've been out of their hunger, they've eaten part of their own flesh. There are other versions where they're described as having massive antlers like a deer and even the skeletal face of a deer. But I don't know if that was they were describing a mask or if that was just an affectation of the creature to incite fear. But they generally are described as being very gaunt, very emaciated, and always hungry.
And where do they reside? Do they live in caves, or do they just walk the woods, or where are they found?
Well, they're generally only sighted in extreme cold winters when game and food is very scarce. So it's hard to say for sure where they would actually live. But I would say since these things are always hungry, I doubt they sleep. They're probably always on the move looking for their next meal.
Hmm. Um, any other high-profile cases of Wendigo encounters?
Well, there was a story that came out of Southern Illinois this year. I think it was in 2018 about a young girl. She was Native American, and she went out one night, and her grandmother had always warned her when she was outside not to whistle because it would attract them. When she would let her dog out, and it wasn't coming back, and it wasn't coming back. So finally, she whistled for the dog. Well, the dog comes running back to the house, just absolutely terrified. She takes the dog in the house and sees this thing coming out of the woods that she described as being a very tall, gaunt humanoid, and it tried to get in the house. It walked around her house multiple times, trying and looking for a way in. And she said that at that point she was so terrified that she waited until dawn and fled the house. She told her grandmother, and they came back with some elders of the tribe and drove it away. But I don't know if it was actually killed or just banished.
I spoke with a woman on Coast to Coast and also on this podcast who had an encounter. I believe it was near the Alabama-Louisiana border with a creature that has been labeled the pale crawler. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Mhm.
this case or this creature. Um, it was right in the middle of the road. She described it as being rather emaciated looking and very pale and gaunt and so forth. Um, I mean, it sounds all the world like an encounter with a Wendigo. What do you think?
Well, there are two types of creatures that people are reported seeing in the cryptid world. One they call the pale crawler, another one they refer to as the rake. The rake originally started out as a creepypasta, one of these internet stories. But much like Slender Man, people began seeing it. But the physical descriptions of what they call the rake sounds to me very much like a Wendigo. It's the physical description is very, very similar to the emaciated humanoid, not the one with the deer antlers, but the emaciated human with the chewed up fingers and missing lips. So I think rakes and pale crawlers are just another name for a type of Wendigo. I think people are seeing the Wendigo creatures and didn't know what else to call it.
So do you think the Wendigo is a demonic spirit? Is it a physical creature? Is it maybe metaphorical? Sort of the incarnation of winter, the embodiment of hunger. What do you think?
I I think that there are greater and lesser extents of Wendigo. I think that some people, like the Wendigo psychosis case, can be touched by it, but I think the true nature of the Wendigo is very spiritual, because they mentioned in a lot of the lore that it was a curse that was brought down on people for eating human flesh. So I think the true spirit of the Wendigo, the true nature of the Wendigo is like you were saying, it's almost demonic, like a nature spirit of hunger and starvation.
D8 will take a quick time out, come back, and continue to delve into the legend of the Wendigo. Back with more in a moment. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Serrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Serrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Serrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. And we are back with D.A. Roberts, who is a writer, author of fiction, primarily in the horror, dystopian, and science fiction genres. And his website is daroberts.net, daroberts.net. Tell me more about the book that you wrote about the Wendigo.
Well, I've got a series that's called Codename Wild Hunt. It's about a military unit that hunts dangerous monsters. And for the second book in that series, I wanted to do something with a Wendigo, and it's set up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Uh, but it's obviously set in the winter, and a group of hunters get ambushed by one of these things, and this team gets sent in to deal with it. And I tried to draw on as much Native American knowledge as I could find. I spoke to a lot of friends. I have a number of close friends who are Native American descent, and when I get several people that I will contact when I need a deeper lore than I'm able to find in just a book. But I think that I was able to capture the spirit of the legend. Like I said, though, that there is such a vast amount of information that varies from tribe to tribe. I kind of had to look for commonalities to pick which things that it exhibited. What was it vulnerable to? But I also wanted to go for the sheer terror factor, about how much terror these things inspire. And they're a truly horrifying thing. I'm not even sure you could call them a cryptid. I think they're more of a nature spirit. I think they're something supernatural. At the very least, they're not bound by normal physical laws that we would expect with an animal. They're capable of far more than we would imagine, and I don't think that we would have an easy time stopping one, even if you were well prepared.
As you say, they're emaciated, they're very gaunt, but at the same time, I mean, they must be powerful creatures if they're able to, dominate a human and devour them. Are they big? Are they
Well, some of the things
bigger
that are set up
stature?
some of the things that are said about them is some of them are quite large. They're incredibly fast. That they've got the ability to mimic people. That if you hear someone call you by name in the woods and you know that person shouldn't be out there, you should not answer that. They're able to lure people away from safety, mimicking the sounds of friends, sometimes even mimicking the sound of a baby crying, to lure people away from the fire, lure them away from the safety of others. So they're very cunning, they're very fast, and they're very strong. Very easily overpower a human, especially a lone one.
And are they known as by the same name as the Wendigo from indigenous tribe to tribe, or do they go by different names?
There are several different versions of the name, but they are all very similar. There's the Wendigo, the Wendiga, the Wentico, the Wentica. But they all sound very similar, but there's variations of the name across multiple tribes. Lots of different versions of basically the same name.
That's that's very interesting that they would have a very similar name throughout such a large geographical location. Again, the Great Plains Indians all the way to the Great Lake Indians. Um, there's something called the Wendigo Cave. I think it's in Appalachia. I'm not exactly sure. Um, what can you tell me about the Wendigo Cave?
I don't know a whole lot about that, but it's one of those places that I want to visit. I'm a big fan of going to places like that. There's a place in Tennessee called Werewolf Springs that that's on my list. But I don't know as much about Wendigo Cave as I would like to know. But it's what I have heard has just got me so intrigued. I've got to find the place. I want to take a trip and take some of my friends and see what we can discover about it.
You, would you actually go into the Wendigo Cave? I mean, how would one
Oh,
protect
absolutely.
oneself? Really?
Well, yeah, I guess the best quote I can think of would be Sean Connery from the movie Highlander. How do you protect yourself against such evil? With heart, faith, and steel.
I mean, are there talismans? Are there what do the
Well, I would certainly be
indigenous
armed.
people? Yeah, you'd be armed. Okay,
Well,
but
what I would carry for something like that is they make a round for a shotgun called a dragon's breath round, and it's an incendiary round, and it's good out to about 100 yards. I would load my shotgun with that if I was going into that cave. Something, some capability of setting something on fire from a distance.
oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. But if you're fighting against something that is spirit, not flesh and bone, is that going to be enough?
You know, I don't know if that would be enough on its own, but I have a good friend. His name is William Nighthawk. He's a Lakota shaman, and if I was going to undertake that expedition, I would be getting with William. And I have a spirit bag that he made for me. In fact, I could show it to you. He made this for me because he knows I tend to go into a lot of odd places. But William made this for me, and it's kind of my green screen's kind of taking it out. But
Maybe
he
just kind
actually
of
has
show it, bring it closer to your face. Sometimes that helps. Closer to your face, right in front of your face there. There. Okay, that's
it's
better.
for some reason it's green screening it out,
Yeah.
but he drew a picture of a Sasquatch on it, and I take it with me anytime I go out in the field. And if I'm not going to be in the field, I keep it close to my family. Um, but I put a lot of faith in what in the Native American beliefs because they they have a much greater understanding of how nature works. So many things that our society has ignored that they've just accepted for centuries. Um, and I would never be dismissive of any of the beliefs because they were here first. They were experiencing these things long before any of my ancestors ever set foot on this continent.
You think that modern day indigenous people from the Great Plains tribes and the Great Lake tribes still believe in the Wendigo?
Absolutely. The Oglala do, the Lakota do. These are creatures that they do worry about. And if you look at the missing 411 people, People still do go missing in the woods without a trace. Is that a Wendigo? I can't say. I can't say it, without a doubt that it's a Wendigo. But even if just one of them is going missing because of a Wendigo, it's enough to worry.
But you have your suspicions. You can't confirm, but you have your suspicions that what's
Right.
responsible for these missing people are with a Wendigo.
I think that there are a number of cryptids that hunt people. I think Wendigo is definitely one of them. I believe Bigfoot at times will cannibalize people, and the creature they call the Dogman, I believe it is also a prolific hunter of humans. Because the encounter stories we get with Dogman specifically, they're never peaceful. People always describe the encounter as hellish or demonic. Plus, you look at the Native American lore, you've got so many stories of creatures like this carrying people out of villages, um, attacking and killing people. Even in the Civil War, during the Battle of Chickamauga, they described a thing they called an old green eyes, which was described very much like a Bigfoot creature that would come out on the battlefield and carry off wounded and dead. That's actually in the officers' notes from both sides of the battle. They saw this thing,
Wow.
and sometimes it carried off dead, and sometimes it carried off the still living. And that was seen all over the Battle of Chickamauga, and that's not the only time that's happened.
Chickamauga, where was that in the United States?
Chickamauga, I believe, was in northern Georgia,
Northern Georgia. And so both Confederate and
right at the root
Unions,
of the Appalachian Mountains.
okay. And so both Union and Confederate soldiers in their notes reported seeing a Sasquatch carry off dead and injured soldiers.
Some of them thought it was a spirit. That's why it's commonly referred to as old green eyes. Some of them thought it was the ghost of something coming out on the battlefield, but many others reported seeing it literally, physically carrying off the dead. In some cases, they sent people to try to stop it, and they didn't come back.
Wow, that's remarkable. That has not made it into many history books, I would gather. Um,
It's a fascinating story. If you ever have some time, look up Old Green Eyes and the Battle of Chickamauga, and the lore is really interesting.
any other Sasquatch reportings or dogmen reportings during the Civil War?
During the Civil War, there were lots of stories of strange things happening. Like at the Battle of the Wilderness, they supposedly heard screams coming from the woods when they opened fire on each other. Uh, Lots of really bizarre things happened during the Civil War. But when you have that much carnage, when you have that much bloodshed, I mean, if you look at the battle, look at the Civil War itself, we lost more. If you can count the wounded and the dead on both sides, we lost more life during the Battle of the Civil War than we did every war we fought after that combined. We lost more at Gettysburg than we lost in all of Vietnam.
Wow. Yeah,
And,
it's something like
that much blood
600,000, isn't it?
soaking into the ground. At Gettysburg, I think we lost like 56,000 people in a day.
Oh my Lord.
And that tremendous loss of life, that much blood is going to attract things, both physical and I think beyond. That's why there's so many haunted accounts of battlefields being haunted even today. People have reported seeing ghosts all over Gettysburg. Just outside of Springfield, one of the biggest battles that was fought in Missouri was the battle of Wilson's Creek. And I have a friend that used to volunteer out there, and he's caught ghosts on camera. These Civil War battlefields are just they're magnets for the paranormal and for strange creatures. And of course, you and I discussed my Teddy Roosevelt theory, how I believe that was Teddy Roosevelt created the National Park Service to create preserves for these huge creatures. And specifically, Teddy Roosevelt was a member of a secret society designed to protect the Ozark's howler, and that's why the Ozark National Forest was set aside specifically for the Ozark howler.
And the Ozark howler is a Bigfoot.
No, the Ozark howler is a Ozark's legend of a creature that's roughly the size of a bear, but built more like a dog with horns. Is reported to see glowing red eyes. People will hear it scream and howl in the mountains and in the passes. That it's supposedly taken people. It's definitely killed livestock. Allegedly, Daniel Boone himself killed one near Cuba, Missouri.
My Lord. Always learning new things with D.A. Roberts, and the website again, daroberts.net. And we'll take a quick time. I'll come back and we'll get into the Dogman Project. Stay with us. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. And we are back with D.A. Roberts, and we've been talking about the legend of the Wendigo. And a correction, I mentioned your work with the Dogman Project, but you're no longer with the North American Dogman Project. You're now with the International Dogman Project?
Correct. It was founded by Nick Valente, and Nick and I we share a lot of philosophies on the research. I spent almost a week with Nick in the Land Between the Lakes recreation area, which is one of the most famous hotbeds for dogman activity. And in fact, I'm planning on going back there this spring. I'm going to be taking part in a documentary there in LBL. But it's a really bizarre area. But yeah, I've kind of moved away from the NADP and now with IDP. They have a similar goal but different methods.
All right. And the name International Dogman Project obviously indicates that this is a worldwide phenomenon, not just limited to the United States or Canada. There are dogman sightings all over the world.
All over the world.
Similar.
Well, if you look at the earliest history of what we believe to be dogmen, we get the word cynocephalus, which dates back to the Greeks and the Romans, when the Greeks and the Romans mentioned in their journals of encountering these dog-headed warriors in northern Africa and the Indus Valley, that they mentioned fighting these creatures, and they were extremely aggressive and very powerful. So we get the first references from we get the first references from Roman and Greek archives and notes that were taken by Alexander the Great and other Roman generals. So they encountered them in Africa, they encountered them in India, and there's still valleys in India today where the locals say that there are these dog-headed creatures up there. In fact, if you look look at some of the more recent stuff, the Catholic Saint Christopher is known as the dog-headed saint.
So what are they? Another species? Another type of hominid? What are they?
I think that's what they are. I think they're another humanoid race that evolved here. Much like I think the similarities with Bigfoot. I think Bigfoot is just something that's very similar to us, not necessarily diverging on the evolutionary scale at the same point that we did, somewhere between us and apes. But they're obviously intelligent. Same thing with Dogman; they're very intelligent. But I think as our ancestors became more became more adept at using tools and using fire, I think we drove these things underground, and I think that's why we don't see them as much. I think they're primarily underground dwellers now. And if you look at the map of the missing 411 in the United States, these clusters of missing people, and then overlay that map with a map of known cave systems in the United States, they're identical.
And you think these cave systems are where the Dogman resides.
Right. I think, well, we know Mammoth Cave goes for hundreds of miles. They've only explored not even a quarter of Mammoth Cave, and they have no idea how deep it goes. But they know parts of Mammoth Cave run from eastern Tennessee to Maine.
Wow. Are you a spelunker? Have you investigated these caves for evidence of Dogman?
In my younger days, when I was in my teens and early 20s, I was an amateur caver, and friends of mine and I would go to caves all over the Midwest and get back into these caves. And I've seen some really interesting things in these caves, but I've never encountered something that I would think would be humanoid. But we have ran into obvious signs where animals have been in there, and in one cave near Eldridge, Missouri, we heard something farther back in the cave that we couldn't identify, and it growled at us, and we got out of there. We didn't stick around because none of us were armed. Maybe the cave was so muddy, there was no way you could have taken anything more than a knife back there without ruining it.
You mentioned, is it land between the lakes in Missouri? This is a huge natural a wilderness area. This is renowned for Dogman sightings.
The land between the lakes is a national parks recreation area that lies on the border between Kentucky and Tennessee.
Uh,
It's about 6 hours from where I live, and it's about 250,000 acres of prime forest land. There are a lot of stories of dogmen in that area. A number of missing people, quite a few deaths attributed to possible dogman attacks. Lots of stories from the area, from people that live in the area of seeing these creatures. In fact, before it was known as land between the lakes, it was known as land between the rivers. It was in 1963 that the Tennessee Valley Authority dammed those two rivers and created those massive lakes. Up until then, it was just this fertile area between these two rivers. It was known as land between the rivers. But the first known sightings of a dogman type creature there date back to the late 1600s with French trappers who called it a loup-garou, which is the French word for werewolf. Even Native Americans in that area, they referred to that whole area as cursed land and told people not to go there.
And are law enforcement, do you think, are they covering up? I mean, if they are investigating, let's say, a gruesome murder, someone they find in the woods, torn to pieces, do you think that they know that it's the dog man? Are they covering it up? Maybe just trying to explain it away? Oh, it's a bear attack or something like that.
I think that in many cases they'll try to dismiss things as dog attacks or bear attacks, even when they know better, because you're going to create a public panic. But when I was in LBL, I'm a retired cop. When I was in LBL, I ran into a deputy sheriff just outside of LBL in a little town called Grand Rivers. And I asked him about the family that was supposedly killed there in '82. And he said, I don't think that's something we should be talking about. So I identified myself as a retired cop, showed him my credentials, and said, I'm just researching a book. I would like to learn more about it. And he looked at me and he said, only reason I'm going to tell you this is because you're a cop. Cop to cop, drop this. This is not someplace you want to go. And he walked
Whoa.
away, wouldn't talk to him anymore.
Whoa. All right. So tell me, what are the details of this family that was killed in 1982?
Allegedly, a family of four was setting up their camper early in the camping season in LBL, and for some reason, this dogman creature came out of the woods. Some speculate that it might have been loud music, it might have been the scent. They don't know what drew the dogman there, but it attacked the father first, nearly ripping his head off in one arm. Attacked the son second as he ran for the RV, and caught him at the door. The mother shut and locked the door, and they had a small daughter. And after the creature killed the boy, it forced its way inside the RV. The mother, by all accounts, fought incredibly trying to protect her daughter. The mother was the most tore up. There was blood all over the inside of the RV. But when the police arrived, there was no little girl. They couldn't find her. Initially, they thought it just had three victims until they started noticing the little girl's clothes and possessions. So they started combing the woods, and two highway patrolmen found her 30 feet up a tree, and she'd been fed on. And then the military got involved. And that's when this whole incident started getting shut up, is when the military and the government got involved. But up until then, they had every agency in the area coming in to investigate, because they were just so overwhelmed. It's a small area, not a huge law enforcement presence. And when the military and the government got involved, these men were all sworn to secrecy. The two highway patrolmen who found the little girl uh, both have passed on, but before they died, they told their story. They said they were not going to our grave, not sharing this story. And that is not the only story of people being killed in LBL. Supposedly in '74, there was a man and a woman killed in Demumbers Bay, and it was witnessed from a boat by a guy from the Game and Fisheries. There's numerous people that have gone missing in there, and every year, and I get this year alone, I think there's half a dozen people that have gone missing in LBL. It's just a very, very bizarre area. I spent a week there, and I can tell you, I've been in the woods all over the United States. I'm a deer hunter. I grew up hunting and fishing. I have never had woods feel as odd as it feels there. Uh, in a week, day and night, running around north end of LBL, I never saw a single animal, not a deer, not a squirrel, not roadkill, nothing. I did hear some strange things, but I never saw any animals, which to me was the weirdest thing, because we were staying just across the canal from LBL in Lucia Grand Rivers. We stayed over there, but there were deer all over the place over there. You find raccoons and squirrels and possums, and they were all over the place near our cabin where we were staying. You couldn't go outside without seeing them, but as soon as you crossed the canal into LBL, nothing.
You caught a fleeting glimpse of a dog man, right?
Yes, it did. It was on our last day in LBL. Nick Fonte and I were driving down the road from Demumbers Bay, where the couple was supposedly killed in '74, and which I've recently learned is only about a mile from where the family of four were killed in '82. So on the same road, and we were driving down the road, and what we were doing is we were looking at primitive campsites, because some of these campsites are set back in the woods, and there's no power or electricity or anything that runs to them. They're just primitive campsites. You pitch a tent, everything you take to camp, you have to bring in yourself. So we were looking at these primitive campsites, and we thought we would check some of these and look and see if we could find tracks or anything like that. I wasn't expecting to see something, and this was in broad daylight. It was about 10:30, 10:45 in the morning. And as we were driving down the road, Nick was driving maybe 3 or 4 miles an hour. We were driving slow, looking for these campsites, and he was looking on the left side of the road. I was looking on the right, and I happened to pass over a figure that was leaning against a tree, and I didn't register what I was looking at until it moved. And when it turned its head and followed followed the movement of the vehicle, I realized what I was looking at. And it was between 6.5 to 7 feet tall, completely black, covered in coarse fur. Had a head like a wolf, but the snout was more like a mastiff or a Rottweiler. It didn't have the jowls, but the snout was shorter and blunter. It was completely black, and when it realized I was looking at it, I started hitting Nick and pointing. He stopped and turned and looked, and I got to see the thing for, I would guess, 15 to 20 seconds, and Nick probably saw it for between around 10 seconds. But once it realized that we not only had stopped, we had identified it and were looking at it, it turned and ran for a ravine that was about 30 yards away. And it took this odd bounding stride. It didn't just run straight like you or I would. It kind of sprang to the right, sprang to the left, sprang to the right again, and then went down that ravine. In about 3 good bounds, it was down in this ravine, and we could hear it, busting through the trees, getting away. So we, like idiots, we jumped out of the vehicle and ran out into the woods to look for it, to follow it, and realized pretty quick we weren't going to be able to get into down that ravine without ropes. So we go back and check, and there was thick leaf litter on the ground, so we weren't able to find any tracks. We could find impressions where it had stepped, but there was no way we were going to get tracks through all that leaf litter. So I went back to the exact tree where it was standing, and I was able to reach up and put my hand in what I believe the spot was where its hand was. Now, if I was to lean against a tree, it would be higher than I would be. Like if I placed my hand against a tree to lean on it like it was, it would be well above that. but it wasn't where I couldn't reach. So that's where I get the estimation. I'm 5'10", so I estimated it was between 6.5 and 7 feet tall because I could reach the same spot. It just was not a comfortable reach for me.
And when it ran off, it was on two legs, correct?
Yes, it was on two legs.
What about its arms? Does it have paws? Does it have opposable thumbs?
It had the hands that I saw and that I've also heard described by numerous people were spindly, like the fingers were slightly longer, like a raccoon's hands. Like the digits are just longer than is natural for a person. And it had definitely had digitigrade feet. It had like the hawk's back legs of a dog. It didn't have legs like you or I. It had digitigrade feet, whereas you and I, what we have is called plantigrade feet. Bigfoot was described as having plantigrade feet, or the regular heel and foot. This was more like a dog's back leg, with the paw was a bit oversized.
What about the upper body, the chest, shoulders?
Upper upper body wasn't as broad as I expected it to be. I was expecting it to be this big hulking creature, but it was built more slender. It looked like it was well, it was definitely capable of incredible speed because it was going quickly, but it didn't look like it was a massive creature like you would expect. It looked more like it had like a chest and shoulders like a dog. Well, the shoulders were obviously attached to arms, but it wasn't barrel chested like you would see from a big primate or a power lifter or something like that. But it was more like it could have dropped all fours and gone very fast. I think these things are capable of going quadrupedal or bipedal. So I think that's why they're mistaken so many times, is most people see them on all fours and just assume it's a wolf.
Do they hunt in packs or are they solitary?
I've heard both. I've heard people seeing them solitary, and I've heard people seeing them in large groups. The only one I've ever seen is that one, and it was definitely alone. Although there could have been others in the deep woods that I didn't see, because the woods at LPL are very thick.
Would you camp or have you camped in the land between the lakes in on the Kentucky-Tennessee border?
I haven't yet. The last time that I went there, my wife and my son went with us, and we stayed at a resort across in Grand Rivers. But when we go back in the spring, the plan is to spend 4 or 5 days at Demumbers Bay to try to see what we can call in.
Aren't you? I mean, I would be petrified. Aren't you afraid of sleeping in the woods in a tent where there have been reports of dogmen tearing people apart?
Uh, I'm I'm one of those guys that I don't want to be the second guy through the door. I used to tell people that, all the time when I was a cop. I don't want to be the guy that comes in next. I want to be the first guy through the door when we're serving a warrant. That's always the guy I wanted to be. My mother used to say when I was a small boy that I would blunder in where angels feared to tread, and that's kind of been the hallmark of my existence. I I'm not wired like most people. Something scares me, I tend to go toward it instead of away from it. Just the way I've always been, and that's the way I will always continue to be. I mean, I want to know. My desire to know more is going to keep me going forward until it either gets me into too much trouble or I can't do it anymore.
Which would you fear more, an encounter with a Wendigo or a dogman?
Definitely the Wendigo, because I think a dogman is a physical creature, and if as it being a physical creature, it can be stopped. But the Wendigo, I think, is more spiritual. I think it's going to be much more difficult to stop a Wendigo if you can stop one at all.
Do you think it's possible? I don't know, some government agency has shot and killed a dogman, has one on ice somewhere?
I think it's very feasible that they have. Same with Bigfoot. I mean, there were how many accounts of from the Mount St. Helens eruption where there are truckloads of dead Bigfoot being brought out of that area. The government has known about these things for a very long time. I believe that Teddy Roosevelt knew about them, and that's why he created the National Park Service. So, I think the government is well aware of these things, and I don't think a lot of people think that Bigfoot or dogmen were created by our government. I don't think since how back the lore on these things go, our government certainly didn't have the ability to genetically create something in the 1700s. So I think these creatures have existed long before our government, but our government is not above exploiting them. If they could find a way to weaponize it, they certainly will.
D.A. Roberts now with the International Dogman Project, daroberts.net. What are you working on? You're always writing. I know that, DA. What are you working on right now?
The book I'm working on right now is it's the second in a new series that I started. It's called Dark Frontiers. It's about a guy right at the end of the Civil War. The book series starts in 1865. The story of Green Eyes at Chickamauga is what inspired the series. It's about a guy who, by just blind luck, winds up hunting these creatures at the end of end of the Civil War. He's an Irishman named Declan Kane, who, by hook, by no choice of his own, winds up face to face with these creatures and then gets drug into the world of hunting them down.
I look forward to that. DA, always a pleasure to spend some time with you. I always learn so much. Thank you so much for this.
My pleasure, sir. Anytime.
Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there.